the champagne ready. The Oklahoma City Thunder have won their first NBA title.
MVP, they're chanting. Haven't heard that in a long time in Houston.
You know, obviously this is an individual award, but I couldn't have done it without my teammates.
The Oklahoma City Thunder have won the NBA championship. James Harden has won the MVP. These are just a couple of phrases that we haven't heard up until now, and that's mainly because of Golden State's dominance in the last few years. But what if the Golden State Warriors did not exist? What if Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, all these players on the team disappeared? How's it going, fellas? My name is Andy, and today we're gonna look at a hypothetical situation, starting from the 2014-15 season and up until the end of the 2017 finals. I know it's not a huge time period, but I had to start somewhere, and the 2014-15 season was when Golden State really exploded onto the scene. For a couple years before that, they were a good playoff team, lost in the first and second round, but it didn't really have a big effect on the NBA landscape. So we're just going to start things off with the 2014-15 season. In the original timeline, the Warriors won 67 games and the NBA championship over the Cleveland Cavaliers. But that's not going to happen now. Instead, at the beginning of the season, the entire Warriors roster vanishes. There are now 29 teams in the NBA. Everyone on that 2014-15 roster no longer exists. So basically, there's no more Steph, no more Klay, no Draymond, no Iggy, nobody. They're all gone. And since we're starting from this season, KD is still on the Thunder. So anyway, what happens now? Well, let's take a look at the Western Conference, since that's where most of the changes happen. In the original 2015 playoffs, these are what the matchups looked like. But of course, there's no more Golden State now, so for convenience, we're just going to take them out and we'll add in the 9-seeded team from that year, which was the Oklahoma City Thunder. Remember, this was a season where Kevin Durant suffered a foot injury in OKC and he was out for the rest of the season. So in this scenario, that still happens. Steph Curry originally won MVP, but since he no longer exists, we'll give the MVP to the runner-up that year, James Harden. Harden wins his first MVP after leading the Rockets to the #1 seed in the West. OKC gets into the playoffs as the 8th seed, like I mentioned earlier, but then lose to the Rockets because they just don't have enough firepower with KD injured. So the Rockets win and they move on to the second round. Now here's where things get a bit tricky. In the original 2015 playoffs, the Rockets beat the Clippers in the second round. That was the year they came back from being down 3-1 because Josh Smith all of a sudden turned into Jesus. But since the standings are different now, that means the Rockets are going to face either the Spurs or Grizzlies in the second round. Now, this Spurs team originally lost in the first round, but since they're still the defending champions and they matched up well against the Grizzlies, we're just going to give them the win. So now we have a second round matchup between the Rockets and the Spurs. Honestly, it's hard to say who'd win the series. The Rockets were amazing that year, and the Spurs kinda slumped a bit and had trouble defending athletic bigs in the playoffs. Dwight played great in the playoffs that year too, and since the Rockets originally beat the Clippers who beat the Spurs, I'm just gonna give the series to the Rockets. So the Rockets make the Western Conference Finals, just like before, and they most likely will face the Clippers since they're the new #2 seed. And now we have this exact same matchup, and again, the Rockets beat the Clippers to move on to the finals. Alright, so what happens in the Eastern Conference? Well, nothing much. Golden State disappearing doesn't really have a huge effect on the East. Let's just say the standings are the same as before and the Cavaliers still reach the finals. Now, we've got a finals matchup between the Rockets and the Cavs. Okay, so at this point, Kevin Love is still out with a shoulder injury. Kyrie, who got injured in Game 1 of the original 2015 finals, let's just say he gets injured again. Not because I like injuries, but because we want to try to keep the scenario as accurate as possible. And since the Warriors faced a Cavs team without Kyrie and Love, the Rockets also will. Anyway, it's hard for me to decide who wins the championship this year. The Rockets beat the Cavs in both of the times they met in the regular season, and they were surprisingly a good defensive team too. They were top 10 in defensive efficiency, and they also played at the second fastest pace in the league. The Cavs only had LeBron, and they were able to win a few games by slowing the pace down and playing more in the half-court setting, which would be really hard to do against this Rockets team. And so I predict the Rockets win the series in 6 or 7 games, and they win the 2015 NBA title. James Harden and Dwight Howard both win their first ever championship, and they celebrate by partying at a strip club for 3 straight days. Alright, so we're moving on to the next season, 2015-16. Golden State's magical 73-win season never happens, so we're just gonna remove them from the top of the standings. And instead, we'll put in the Utah Jazz as the 8th seed, which doesn't really matter, they're gonna get swept anyway. The original MVP was Steph Curry again, but not anymore. Now it's Kawhi Leonard, who originally finished second in MVP voting this year. So Kawhi wins his first MVP. He joins Michael Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon as the only players in history to win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. That's awesome. Now let's see what happens in the 2016 playoffs. The Spurs are now the 1st seed, and looking at this bracket, it looks like they'll make the Western Conference Finals pretty easily. OKC is the new 2 seed, and they also make the conference finals pretty easily as well. Now we have a Spurs-Thunder Western Conference matchup. As I'm sure most people know, the Thunder beat them in 6 games in the original 2016 playoffs. So it happens again. The Thunder beat the Spurs and make their long-awaited return to the NBA Finals. On the East, nothing really changes again. The Cavs still make the finals, but the difference this time is that the team is healthy. But this series would be insane, and to be honest, I kinda wish we did have a Cavs-Thunder finals back then. Keep in mind, the 2016 Thunder were ridiculously good in the playoffs. They were up 3 games to 1 over the Warriors at one point, but a series of unfortunate misplays killed them at the end. But now, of course, there is no Golden State and they're facing the Cavs in the finals, which honestly isn't a great matchup for the Thunder. Historically, LeBron has played extremely well against Durant, Westbrook, and OKC in general, and they just don't have the personnel to stop him, especially since Kyrie and Kevin Love are both healthy. The Thunder also ran some bigger lineups in the playoffs this year, so Love won't be struggling like he did against Golden State. And the Cavs win the series in 6 games. LeBron still wins his first championship with Cleveland. So at the end of the day, the result of the 2016 finals is still the same. Now moving on, the 2016 offseason is a bit interesting. We all know Durant bolted for Golden State, but since there is no Golden State, he decides to stay in OKC. Since, they just made the finals. They're the best team in the West, and there's really no other place that would give him a better chance. Besides, joining Cleveland, which, let's assume Durant doesn't do that. Okay, so maybe Boston could be a possibility, but at the time, they were still losing in the first round. Maybe he could have went to San Antonio too, but I don't know. They'd have to clear up more cap space. Alright, so let's just say he re-signs with OKC. Oh, and the Thunder still make the trade where they sent Serge Ibaka to Orlando for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. They let Dion Waiters go to Miami still, and Oladipo would go on to have a much better season now since OKC has more spacing. In the 2016-17 season, instead of Golden State being at the top, we now have OKC being at the top. Durant and Westbrook are both angry after losing the finals again, and they're gonna do whatever they can to get back. The other change is that since Durant is still on the Thunder, Westbrook no longer wins MVP. Let's be real, he won't be putting up a 30-point triple-double or something like that with Durant still on the team. Both of them are gonna split the MVP votes, so instead, the original runner-up, James Harden, gets it again. Yeah, there you go. Without Golden State, James Harden would be a 2-time MVP and champion. That almost sounds too crazy, but I think it is a realistic possibility in this hypothetical scenario. Okay, anyway, the 2017 playoffs. The Thunder are the top team in the West, and with the Rockets and Spurs both behind them. The Nuggets squeezed into the playoffs as the new 8th seed, but as usual, that doesn't really matter. The Thunder beat the Nuggets in the first round, then the Jazz in the second round, and then in the conference finals, we're assuming the same injuries also happen. So, unfortunately for the Spurs, Kawhi still gets injured in some way. This would mean an easy series for OKC. And also, it's kinda hard to say whether the Spurs would actually beat the Rockets in the playoffs. In this scenario, since the Rockets won the 2015 championship, do they still keep Dwight? Or do they realize that he's still regressing and let him go anyway? Also, would Mike D'Antoni still be hired if they won a championship with Kevin McHale as the coach? Their entire style of play might be completely different for all we know. But like I said, it's impossible to tell, so we're just gonna say the Spurs still beat them, just like in the original 2017 playoffs. So anyway, OKC returns to the finals, but this time, they beat the Cavs. The 2017 Cavs were in the bottom half of the league defensively, and their age definitely showed. The Thunder are now rocking a lineup of Westbrook, Oladipo, Durant, Taj Gibson, and Steven Adams. They also have Sabonis, Kanter, Doug McDermott, Alex Abrines, and Jeremy Grant coming off the bench. They can go big or small, and athletically, they're far superior to the Cavs. The Cavs had the oldest bench in the league, and it would definitely hurt them, just like what we saw against Golden State. The Thunder take the series in 6 games this time, and they are now the new 2017 NBA champions. And there you have it, everyone. If the Golden State Warriors never existed in the last couple of years, a lot would change. Of course, I couldn't cover everything cause there's just way too much. I mean, veteran guys like David West, for example, would sign elsewhere, and a couple of other free agents might choose a different team if they never saw Durant join the Warriors. James Harden could have been a 2-time MVP and have a ring by now. Westbrook and Durant could have had a ring as well. The Western Conference would be way more competitive, but at the end of the day, you know, this is all just hypothetical. I'm sure you can go back in NBA history and look at any era, and you could do the same thing. For example, if Michael Jordan didn't exist, I'm sure guys like Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, John Stockton, they could have won a championship. It's always fun to think about though, about how different the NBA landscape would be if you just remove a team from existence. Alright, that's all folks. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you next time.